In this video, I will explain the 3 most common mistakes I see with watercolors and how to prevent them. Here are the 3 examples of the 3 most common watercolor problems that I see students making. So you can see they're labeled 1, 2, and 3. In this video, I'll explain what the problem is, describe what it looks like, and then show you a solution for how to correctly paint without making this problem happen. Our first problem, when you look at it, you can see that the paint is almost scratchy looking. We have this texture going on that looks messy. The entire object is not filled in because of all these white scratchy spaces that are in between the color. The problem here is not enough water. There's not enough water happening on this cup right here, and the way we want to prevent this problem is by making sure that you have a good ratio of paint to water. So, here is our example of how to correctly fill in an object without causing this not enough water problem. So the first step is to make sure your brush isn't dry. If your brush is completely dry, then when you come over here to pick up your paint, the color that you get on there, if you do get any, is probably going to be sticky. So I make sure I have plenty of water on my brush first. Now when I pick up the paint, I want to make sure that I pick up some paint by kind of petting the watercolors to get the paint on there. And when I paint on, I want to see smooth strokes without scratchiness happening in between. If your brush starts to run out of paint and water, then you're going to start to see those scratches happening. This means you've run out of water and paint. So I need to make sure that I go back for more. If you just pick up paint, the paint is pretty dry in the tray, so make sure that you pick up water each time. So I go back for more water, pick up a little bit more paint on the end of my brush, and then I can continue. When I'm filling in my shape like this, I'm going to see way less of those scratchy lines and a whole lot more smoothness. Remember, get water and get paint so that you can make nice, smooth paintbrush strokes with your watercolors. This is the solution to problem number 1, which is not having enough water. Our second problem, you can see that in the top right, this cup is super dark. The paint, if you look at it up close, looks like it's still wet. It's kind of sticky because it's not even drying. The problem here with number 2 is too much paint. This is one of the most common problems that I see. We are painting with watercolors here. It's not the same as painting with acrylic paints. You want to be able to see through the color. You want to be able to see through to the other side so that the entire surface isn't covered with a dark layer of pigment. So to prevent this problem, you need to make sure that you pick up, again, the right ratio of paint to water. If you pick up tons of water and then you start adding it to your paint, more water, adding it to your paint, and then swirl it all around in there to make basically a soup of color, then you're going to end up with this problem. When you're getting the paint out of the tray here, you don't want to scoop up paint. If you're doing that, then you have way too much paint. You're also going to run out really fast. So to prevent that problem from happening, I make sure I have plenty of water on my brush, and then just barely touch the end of it into your paint. You want to be able to see through your color. If you pick up too much paint, you should be able to notice right away that it's really dark. If this happens, don't go up and pick up more paint. That's not the solution here. We see some scratchiness happening also. You need more water. So I'm not even going to pick up more paint. I'm just going to pick up water only. And I can paint that over it, smooth it out, and try to spread that color out so that you don't have so much paint all in one area. That is one way to prevent this from happening, too much paint. It'll also save you on your materials. The next mistake I see really commonly with students is this one. We can see that there are scratches going outside of the lines. The shape isn't filled in entirely. There's these big gaps in there. You can see that the paint goes outside the lines and there's drips all over around the outside of our object. The problem here is not being careful. If you're not being careful with the watercolors, you're going to end up with a whole lot of mess, and it's going to not make your artwork look nearly as nice. The way to prevent that, there are a few things that you can do. When you pick up the water on your brush, you may have already noticed me doing this. I pick up water on my brush and I don't do this. If you tap your brush on the side of the cup, little water splashes splash out all over the place. If your water's clear, that might not be a problem, but if your water has started to get a little bit murky because of the color mixed in there, then that color is going to drip onto your paper. So when you pick up your brush, wipe it on the side instead of tapping. When you walk over to pick up your color, or when you go over to pick up the color, make sure that you pick up the color, and if your brush is drippy because you haven't wiped it on the side, then you might end up with a drip that lands on your paper. To prevent that from happening, like I said, wipe it on the edge will definitely help. Another thing you can do is, instead of taking your brush over your paper to get to your shape, you can always go around. So I can take my brush all the way around to the bottom here, and now I can safely get to this shape without having to go over this area where I want to try to keep it white. So pick up plenty of water, wipe it on the side, don't tap it, because you don't want it to be dripping all over the place. The metal part here, the ferrule, there's a little drip on the bottom of it here. Sometimes that happens, so when you wipe it on the side, try to wipe the whole brush. And then when I pick up my watercolor, I'm going to go around my paper so that I can reach my cup over here to fill it in. If that's too difficult, turn your paper. There's nothing wrong with getting the shape that you're working on much closer to the area where you're trying to pick up your paint. So wipe it, pick up paint. Now, the other thing that you can do to keep your paint inside the lines, I'm pointing my brush at the edge of my shape. Basically, the tip of the paintbrush is touching my pencil line. And what that does is it helps me to be able to control where I am placing the paint really easily, because the tip of the brush, like the tip of your pencil, is helping to control that it's not going outside the line. You'll notice that I'm turning my paper a whole lot. This is how I keep my paint from dripping all over the place. If you are not pointing your brush at your line and you're going about it the opposite way, so if I am trying to, let's turn my paper so I don't drip over. So I'm trying to paint on this line right here, and I have my brush pointed to the left that way, then the tip of my brush is not touching the edge of the cup. Now I could be really awesome and go along and see if maybe I do stay in the line, but you can see that I didn't make it quite to the end. So I might get a little bit closer here, but oh, now I've gone outside. If you turn your brush or turn your paper so that the tip of the brush is touching the line, that is going to help you out a ton. I can also turn my hand. If you set your hand on the paper and slide it across the paper, that might also cause streaks and things to happen. To recap, if your paint strokes look scratchy and messy, you're not using enough water. Make sure that each time you pick up paint, you also pick up a little bit of water along with it. If your paint looks really dark and you can't see through it at all, make sure that you are using plenty of water with it and only picking up a tiny bit of paint each time. If you have messy drips and splatters and you're not staying in the lines, make sure that you point your paintbrush toward the line, go around your paper, and wipe it on the side of your water cup instead of tapping it.